If you want to speak English more fluently, there are 3 exercises you need to start doing from now on. If you don't know me very well, I am Teacher Prix, and I'm going to help you talk to anyone, anywhere, anytime in English. Consider subscribing to the channel, but let's talk about the first exercise, and I will explain each one of them so that you understand why they're so beneficial to you and how they can help you speak English more fluently. So the first one is avoid repeating the same word in one part, in one chunk of your answer. This happens very frequently. When you find yourself in a situation where you have no choice, you have to think fast and give an answer, your brain will always resort to the same words. Where is the problem with that? When you're giving an answer and in a short part of your answer, you repeat the same word. I have and I have, but she has and I have. That is the problem. Now, I'm not saying you cannot repeat words, that it's wrong, that you will be considered a beginner if you always repeat the words. However, if you want to speak more fluently, you need to practice the reduction of the repetition of some words that we all use. So what is the exercise? We need to start with an identification process. What are the words you love the most? What are the words you tend to repeat more when using your English? So for that, I want you to pick a question or 2 or 3, and I want you to record yourself speaking, answering that question for 3 minutes. Has to be a little longer because I want to see what to deliver in 3 minutes. And the words you tend to resort to during that time. Finished? Fantastic. What are you going to do next? Well, you're going to identify the words that you tend to use the most. That happens. So the exercise here is very simple. Recording yourself speaking. Go through an identification process. What are the words I use the most? And then you will redo the work. You will answer the same question. But this time, you will try to find synonyms, collocations, phrasal verbs. You will never build up your vocabulary if you always go back to the same words. And to be able to advance your vocabulary repertoire, you need to do this kind of practice. It will allow you to remember different kinds of expressions and collocations based on how you study. So look at this example. This is very common, and I hear people talking like that. Again, nothing wrong with repeating words, but depending on the person you're talking to, let's say you're talking to the CEO of a company, or you're trying to show someone that you're an excellent candidate, or perhaps you're just making small talk with a stranger on the street. This is something that I have listened, and it happens to all of us. I don't have much time to study, but I have some time on weekends. But when I have time during the week, I try to spend some time studying. Did I understand? I understand. Of course, I understood everything that was said. But here, pay attention. I don't have. Time. Have some time. Again, time. Have and time again. But then when I have time, so 3 times using have and using time, I try to spend some time studying. Oh, Priscilla, I would never speak like that. We do. In the same exercise I am proposing to you, I do it to myself. And I am sometimes flabbergasted by some repetitions I tend to make. So even I have to work on myself. So it is natural. What happens to the brain when we are communicating, having a conversation with someone? We tend to look for the words that are easier, the words we feel more comfortable with. That's why when you're talking to someone, you will deliver a much lower level of your fluency. And how do you work on that? How do you boost that communication skill? By practicing. This kind of practice will be the one that will allow you to level up your vocabulary and speaking. So what would I do next? Okay, now how can I change the way I expressed myself in this answer? Let's go. I don't have much time to study. Nothing wrong with that. However, I didn't want to use but. I used however. However, I try to make up for it on weekends. I changed the sentence a little. Instead of saying, oh, I have some time on weekends. Well, I try to make up for it on weekends. Do you know the meaning of make up for? To compensate for the time I didn't have during the week. Well, I make up for it on weekends. Oh, but Priscilla, you're changing the meaning of the sentence. Well, if you're looking to sharpen your communication skills, that is bound to happen, and it's all right. You're supposed to use different expressions, different collocations, different phrasal verbs, and the meaning will change a little. But the context, that's what I'm focused on. So look, and then I continue. I try to make up for it on weekends. So here, I didn't repeat time anymore. I used time once. I don't have time to study. And I used time and have. Very nice, no problems. There's nothing wrong with have, nothing wrong with time. However, I try to make up for it on weekends. If I am not as busy during the week, but when I have time during the week, instead of saying, well, if I have time during the week, then I can say if I'm not as busy. Translation, if I have some time, if I'm not as busy. The ideas don't need to be 100% the same, but it's pretty close. That's the idea I'm trying to convey here. I do my best. Look, I do my best to get some study done. Instead of saying I try to spend time, I do my best to get some study done. I understood that the main point here is to talk about time and studying and having time to study. So you are only able to do this, to think about alternatives when you slow down, when you listen to yourself, and you begin to identify your weaknesses, the words you repeat too much. And this is a work in progress. The more you practice this, the better you get at identifying the words you repeat and finding replacements, good ones. And they don't have to be the most polished or unique words. No, that's not what fluency is. But when you take the time to slow down, analyze what you're saying, and find a way to express yourself differently and in a more polished manner, you achieve the results you're looking for. And that's the purpose of this exercise. How often should you do it? How fast do you want to improve? That's the question you have to answer, because it will define the frequency you should do this exercise. If you study 3 times a week, do this 3 times a week. Pick one question. You don't need to do this for too long. Choose one question. Then record yourself. Answer that question. Listen, observe, take notes, find possible replacements, collocations, synonyms, advanced expressions, and phrasal verbs. Do it again. Record yourself again. This is practice, and repetition is king. Now, number 2. Avoid filler sounds and unnecessary words or prolonging sounds. This is also something you need to do as an exercise. I'm telling you what you should be avoiding, but there is an exercise involved, because simply telling you, hey, don't use filler sounds, it's not healthy for you. It's not ideal. If you want to show you are professional and confident when speaking English, that is not enough. That's not why you're here. And speaking of being here, if you're enjoying this video, you can like and perhaps share it with a friend, or even consider subscribing, because more than 50% of people who watch my lessons are not subscribed. But what is my point here? Again, when we catch ourselves in the middle of a conversation and we're thinking, what do we tend to do? I have this idea, and I think it's a good idea. And let me explain. We naturally resort to filler sounds and filler words. So I was thinking that this is kind of a good idea. Like, if we combine efforts, maybe we native speakers talk like that. We see in movies, we see in TV series. If you work in an international company, you hear native speakers speaking like that. Should you do the same? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And a native speaker, despite using filler sounds and unnecessary words, will still sound more fluent than me, using filler sounds, because I'm not American, I'm not Canadian, I'm not Australian. And by resorting too frequently to filler sounds and filler words, prolonging sounds, I will sound much less fluent compared to a native speaker doing that. And this is a habit. Nowadays, people are extremely uncomfortable with moments of silence. Watch this video again. Pay attention to moments where I paused briefly and thought about what to say next. People become uncomfortable. They go to the next video. Don't leave. They try to watch the next thing because they have become too uncomfortable with seconds of silence. And if we, non-native speakers, never practice, I call it mindful silence. We need to include that in our practice, because if I'm constantly doing this when I'm thinking, this becomes a habit. And naturally, we won't know all the words. We will need to think a little, depending on the complexity level of the question. If it's a more difficult question, we will need to think more. If it's a question regarding your opinion, you will be required to think a little further before providing your final answer. It's natural. We're human beings. We're not machines. We're not ChatGPT. So this means your listening practice and your vocabulary practice must be in alignment with your needs. And why listening? Well, listening matters. You will need to do a little bit of listening and vocabulary work to reduce your use of filler sounds and filler words and prolonging sounds. This will help you understand conversations more easily. This will help you better prepare yourself for conversations anywhere, anytime, whether it is formal or informal. Just because I'm not using filler sounds and filler words, it doesn't mean I'm being formal. It just means I'm speaking more in a more polished way. It doesn't mean I'm being formal. Now, with that in mind, you need a new habit that begins with your practice. As I said, you need to be more mindful of your silence moments. It is acceptable to be quiet for 2 seconds and let your mind process the information. Slowing down will actually increase your authority. People will pay attention to you. I'm not trying to imply that you're going to be like this. No, not at all. All I'm saying is that there will be moments when you will need to go a little bit more slowly in order to build your idea, because you're human. Integrated practice is also in the game, because what is actually the exercise you're going to do? I have 3 options here for you. 3 types of integrated practice ideas that will help you reduce your filler sounds, filler words, and prolonging the sounds. But yeah, we need to work on that. First one, listening plus vocabulary plus speaking. Listening, I won't include listening because listening is something that we should always work on. So you're going to listen to any sort of material, ideally a resource that has subtitles, because you're going to be doing some work on the subtitles. So you need the subtitles. Listening, something short, nothing too long. Up to 5 minutes, that's more than enough. So find a video on YouTube, on TikTok, you name it. Choose your source carefully though. Find the subtitles, as long as there's a subtitle option available. You're going to be doing vocabulary work, studying the new words you don't know, and practicing your English speaking. What are you going to be practicing? What are you going to be talking about? You're going to be describing what you listened. And while you do that, you're going to time yourself. You're going to set a timer to 1 minute, or 2 minutes. You're not going to be speaking for too long, because as much as I want you to practice mindful silence, I don't want you to be silent for 5 minutes. So you need to set a timer. You will practice for 2 minutes. You will describe the content. There will be moments when you will need to pause. No problems. And record yourself, because then you will listen and pay attention. How long was the silence moment? Because if it was too long, then you need to work on that a little bit, okay? The second practice is listening vocabulary and writing. To remember more vocabulary, you need to do more writing, and to understand that some filler sounds, some filler words like so, but, they become a habit because you don't work on your writing skills. And writing will allow you to improve your speaking skills, because it will make you use a little bit more grammar, vocabulary, more intentionally. And that's the moment when you really focus on creating better sentences, connecting your ideas in a better way. And that takes a little bit more time. So when you slow down and you practice your writing, you think a little more. Ideally, you can even include speaking after that. After you do this process, then you can include speaking. And speak about the listening. Again, you're going to write about the listening material. You're going to talk about the listening material. But in the second integrated practice combo, I would even include speaking, because after all this preparation, speaking would be amazing. And the last one here is listening plus shadowing plus pronunciation. You're going to pick the material, the subtitles, and you will read aloud with your voice. But shadowing means you're trying to imitate the speaker's intonation, energy, mannerisms in their voice. That's what shadowing is. It is a bit more intuitive when it comes to pronunciation work. Additionally, work on pronunciation. Pay attention to words you don't know, new words, words that are a little bit more complicated for you. You know, it's difficult to pronounce correctly. So take the time to listen to those words and repeat them individually. This would be a very good practice. Now, before I move on to the next one, make sure to share this video with a friend. And if you're interested, my study plan cycle will help you on your journey to fluency. If you want to be successful, if you want to speak English fluently, you have to start with a master plan. And that's what I offer in this study plan. Check the link below, but let's keep rolling. Avoid speaking too fast to sound more fluent and confident, especially if you struggle with many different vowel sounds and consonant sounds. Naturally, as non-native speakers, we won't be able to speak the same way native speakers do. They connect the sounds way more than we do. They have been doing that for a really long time. Therefore, it is much more, that comes much more natural to them compared to you and I. And what happens, and I do this a lot, I have a consulting call product that I sell, and you can purchase if you're interested, where I analyze a person's English speaking and English skills for 1 hour, and then I provide a report and recommendations based on the call. And what I have been able to identify, especially with the students at a B1, B2 level, is some of them speak too fast. And speaking too fast will never be a sign of English fluency. It boils down to your pronunciation and grammar. But in most cases, when I'm talking to people, it is not a sign of fluency. What are you supposed to do if you want to sound more confident, if you want to sound more fluent? You have to slow down. And the exercise I recommend is a reading practice. It is not a shadowing practice. It is different. Shadowing, I am trying to make you catch up and pick some sounds and some intonation patterns and improve your pronunciation with a little bit more pressure. That's different. A reading practice is slow, because I want you to focus on the proper enunciation of the words. I am much more worried about the movement of your mouth and the tongue, and how you connect the sounds, and how you are able to continuously repeat and follow the text and improve your intonation while you're reading. And if you speak too fast, this is the best way to slow down. And you need the audio source to do this reading practice, okay? You do, but it's a reading practice. It is not a shadowing. Here, I'm not trying to imitate the intonation as much with the same energy. I'm really focusing on becoming more aware of the sounds, of the patterns, how native speakers link the sounds. You will see that when you're reading, you will need to slow down. And if you naturally speak too quickly, if you're from India, if you're from certain Arabic countries, you naturally speak too quickly. And to sound fluent and professional in many environments, you will need to slow down, especially if your pronunciation is not on point. So this exercise will help you improve your pronunciation. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested, make sure to get my study plan cycle, and if possible, share this video with someone you care about. Other than that, I'll see you in the next one. Bye!